The Dallas Mavericks dropped their sixth straight basketball game in a 109-108 loss to the Phoenix Suns, the second consecutive game that the Phoenix Suns walk into the American Airlines Center and walk out with a win. Chris Paul had an absolutely spectacular night with 34 points. Devin Booker, who hit the game-winning shot with 1.5 seconds left, scored 24 points as the Dallas Mavericks dropped to 8-13 on the season, losing, as I said, their sixth consecutive game. Kevin Gray of 105 through the fan. Appreciate everyone subscribing to my YouTube channel right here at Kevin Gray Sports. You can follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, also at Kevin Gray Sports. This was a gut-wrenching loss for the Dallas Mavericks as they came out with a lot of competitive fire and juice throughout this basketball game, a team that was determined to get themselves a win on their home floor against an opponent who has had their number now for quite some time. And yet and still at the end, the small details is what doomed the Dallas Mavericks once again. Rick Carlisle saying that that he knew that they had a foul to give when they had an opportunity to try and foul Devin Booker. They simply did not take it. That led to Devin Booker hitting a three-point shot to end the night for the Dallas Mavericks. Luka Doncic on the night had 25 points on 7 of 19 shooting, was a +8. Josh Richardson played his best game of the season with 24 points of his own, 4 assists and 5 rebounds in a very aggressive performance that he talked about after the game with respect to how he was feeling. Luka Doncic, who has criticized the effort of this basketball team in recent days, said once again for the second night in a row that the Mavs' effort was better despite the fact that they lost. Here is Luka Doncic talking about the effort from this basketball team and what they will need to do to stem the tide with respect to how they are handling this losing streak. Here's what Luka had to say after the game was over with.
We lost because of details, but I think our effort was great. And we're getting there. I know it.
Look at when things are going like this. How tough is it to remain positive and remain together and not kind of splinter apart and that sort of thing?
I mean, it's tough, but there's always another game coming. We gotta stay positive. I think this is where you can see what we are, in the tough moments, and we are stepping together. I think the last two games were way better than before, and this is where the big teams come together.
So Luka Doncic saying that this team needs to stay positive, needs to stay together, obviously weathering through a very tough stretch right now where they are having lost their sixth consecutive basketball game before they head to Atlanta to play a basketball game before ultimately coming back home to take on the Golden State Warriors. But this was a team you could tell early on in the first half was playing with much more competitive fire. Their ability to get out in defense and in transition. You saw Tim Hardaway with a couple of steals in the first half. Maxi Kleber made his return for the Dallas Mavericks. He got active early with a tip-in dunk, also a block shot. You could tell that this team was trying to get after loose balls, block shots, trying to make the kinds of rotations and communications that have been lacking over the last several games with respect to their defensive effort, energy, and focus to detail. Yet and still, Chris Paul was able to get off anything that he wanted to from the field as he went 14 of 20 from the field for the Phoenix Suns, getting into the paint at will, hitting that patented elbow jumper that he loves to hit. Chris Paul has been a thorn in the Mavericks side for years and proved so once again in these last two ball games with 29 points in the first win against the Dallas Mavericks and another 34 points that he poured in for the Phoenix Suns in game number 2. The Phoenix Suns also had 6 guys in double figures, so you saw a lot of balanced scoring, but it was led by Chris Paul and especially in the fourth quarter by both Chris Paul and one Devin Booker. I asked after the game to Josh Richardson about the effort that he displayed, obviously playing one of his best games of the year, and how he felt. He had a very interesting comment about how he had been feeling over the last few days with respect to his knees. Here is Josh Richardson talking about the ultimate aggressiveness that he had throughout this basketball game, the shot that obviously at the end that was made over him, and how this team is going to stay positive going forward. Here is what Josh Richardson had to say after the game was over with. Hey, Josh, kind of a two-part question for you. Obviously, it seemed like you were aggressive early looking for your shot. What was the mentality going into tonight's game and being aggressive? And what's the messaging about staying positive going forward here as you guys go through this stretch?
Yeah. So personally, I think that my aggression just came from, my knees have been bothering me the last few days. So it's kind of been tough for me just to, do the things I'm used to normally doing. But, I've been doing everything I can to get back, to how I normally am. And I felt pretty good today. So I feel like that's part of where a lot of that came from. And then, what was the second part?
Kevin, you should be able to unmute yourself.
What was the second
The
part?
the messaging about staying positive going forward throughout the stretch, individually and collectively as a team.
Yeah, I mean it's definitely a tough stretch for us, but it's the NBA. Every team is good, and I think that I'm not big on excuses or anything, but I think that our locker room needs to stay positive and know that we've only played one game with our whole roster this year, and I think that that's a big part. And Maxi's going to be working back into the lineup and getting back to his normal self, but I think that's playing a big part for us. And we just got to know it's not getting any easier, honestly. I think that's another big thing that we have to keep on our minds.
So Josh Richardson, much like how this Mavs team has needed to do so over these last several games, needs to weather the storm. This was the first time all season long that we saw the full roster of this team comprised on the floor together. What was interesting about this game is that Dwight Powell did not play a single minute of this basketball game, but again, at the same time, the Dallas Mavericks had their full complement of players for the very first time this season, and this is a team that has needed to find some good health for itself going forward, given the amount of adversity that they have gone through this season with the health and safety protocols, the injuries, the returns, and the goings and comings of players in and out of the lineups and rotations due to the health and safety protocols and the injuries that this team has suffered, namely in the return of Kristaps Porzingis. Speaking of Kristaps Porzingis, this was a man who struggled offensively in the first half, looked like he had lost a lot of confidence in his offensive game, especially in the first half, but turned it up, especially in the fourth quarter. Had 10 points in the fourth quarter, including a three that tied it at 97 to get the Mavs back into the basketball game. Kristaps Porzingis had a very interesting comment. I asked him after the game also about developing that confidence as the game went on and turning it up in the fourth quarter, and also what this Mavs team needs to do in making sure that they stay positive going forward. Here's some interesting notes from Kristaps Porzingis about the kind of playing time he may need to communicate to his team more about how he needs to stay in rhythm with respect to more minutes being played. Here's what Kristaps Porzingis had to say about that. Hey, KP, kind of a two-part question. After struggling in the first half, we're able to get it going in the fourth quarter. What changed as far as your offensive game in the fourth quarter? And what's the messaging about getting through this tough stretch of staying positive together throughout this stretch?
For me, what changed, I just played a little bit of longer stretch. I think that gave me more time to get in a rhythm and get better looks and not rush things, which I tend to do a lot now that I'm playing shorter minutes. And that's something maybe I can communicate and so I'm not as out of rhythm early in the game, and then but it felt better, much better late in the game, and got some good looks and got into my rhythm, and then it's tough right now. Of course, nobody likes to lose, and we're just trying to get out of this as a group, grow from each game. But we're not content with where we at right now, and I said what can I say? We just got to get back to work, practice, stay locked in, and try to make a step forward in terms of our growth as a team.
So Kristaps Porzingis saying that he may need to play in longer stretches to get into the kind of rhythm that he desires in order to stay in the rhythm that he was able to find in the fourth quarter. Obviously, Kristaps Porzingis has struggled on both ends of the floor defensively in this game, struggled in the first half, played a little bit better as the game went on in terms of some of his movement, but at the same time, another blown lead for the Dallas Mavericks in this basketball game. They led by 11 in the third quarter, much like how they led by 15 in the third quarter and blew that lead against the Phoenix Suns in game number 1 of this 2-game series. They blow an 11 point lead in this game in the third quarter also. So this is a team, again, continuing to struggle, especially from the three-point line, only going 10 of 32 from the field, a 31% clip, but also not being able to hold leads and not being able to close out games the way that they need to. Obviously, in this basketball game, you saw the clutch shooting and the clutch playmaking by guys like Chris Paul and Devin Booker, obviously with a chance to potentially take the lead. Chris Paul somehow missed a wide-open layup after making everything throughout this basketball game, missed a wide-open layup, but still the Dallas Mavericks were not able to capitalize on that miscue. And look, you can say what you want about what this team is putting forth in terms of its effort, much better in the last two games, but what is starting to haunt this team, especially in the 6-game losing streak, is the attention to detail. Again, I go back to not taking the foul when you had an opportunity to try and prevent Devin Booker from coming off of that screen and ultimately hitting the knockdown three-point shot to bury the Mavs in this particular basketball game. That is a decision that has to be taken forth and done seriously by this team in order to find themselves getting wins going forward here. The attention to detail coupled with the effort and the execution down the stretch, because if it's not one thing, it's another, it seems like, for this Mavs team. When they're putting forth the effort, they're not executing down the stretch. When they're putting forth effort, they're not paying attention to the details that will give them an opportunity to win a basketball game, or they're not shooting well from the three-point line, or when they get good performances from guys like Tim Hardaway Jr., Josh Richardson to help stem the scoring tide before Luka gets going, especially the way that he did in the third quarter. It's always something with this Mavs team. This stretch is going to be extremely important for them, especially once they get back home, when they start to play the Golden State Warriors and they go through a stretch where they have 7 consecutive home games. That 7-game stretch is going to tell us a whole heck of a lot about this Mavericks team in terms of their resolve, their character, and their ability to execute down the stretch, because there will be no excuses now. This team has its full complement of players back. They will have an opportunity to be at home for several basketball games to develop the kind of rhythm that they need to develop in order to try and get themselves a win, because right now it's just about getting a win. It's not about stringing together a win streak or anything of that nature. Get a win to improve the psyche of this entire basketball team, to try and put themselves in a better position where they're gaining confidence that they can execute down the stretch, be able to play defense in consistent stretches of time, and not have the mental lapses and lack of attention to detail that will cost them basketball games the way that it did in game number 2 against the Phoenix Suns down the stretch, with not taking the foul on Devin Booker, which ultimately led to their demise and losing that basketball game. This team will stay together, try to weather through the storm, and find themselves. Look, Tim Hardaway talked about it after the game. It's difficult to win basketball games in this league, and you learn things by going through the trenches with your brothers, as what Tim Hardaway said after this game. And a lot of Mavs fans aren't trying to necessarily hear that right now. What they want to see is results on the floor. And then when you don't see the results, even with the effort that was put forth, it gives you a lack of confidence that this team right now can find that measure of resolve and character to be able to get a win. They will need to do so, and do so very soon, because this season, as it stands right now, is starting to get away from them a little bit now at 8-13, needing to get a win desperately. They will go to Atlanta to try and get that win against Trae Young, who Luka Doncic and Trae Young are forever linked together because of what happened in the draft, obviously few years ago, being traded for one another. But the Dallas Mavericks fall 109-108 on their home floor. Once again, their 6th consecutive loss. They will go on to the road to take on the Atlanta Hawks next, before returning home to take on the Golden State Warriors on Thursday. You can follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Kevin Gray Sports. Be sure to subscribe to my channel right here at Kevin Gray Sports. This has been The Gray Area. We'll talk to you later. Peace.